the why is the building block and where you have to really start and be articulate and a little unforgiving with yourself to get there and really test it and share it with people and say, does that make sense to you? Does that sound silly? Does that sound right? Does that really resonate?
Welcome, everyone. I am so excited to be here today with David Hurwitt. David, welcome to What the Fundraising.
I'm glad to be here, Mallory. Thanks for having me.
You have such an incredible wealth of experience in a lot of different industries. And I'm excited to talk to you today because you're a real innovator and disruptor. And I love the project you're currently working on. So why don't you tell everyone just a little bit about you and what brings you to our conversation?
Sure. Well, I run a startup company called Troove, and our goal is to really help people find their passion, their people, and their place in higher education, which is kind of a fancy way of initially at least saying, how can you help somebody pick a better college or pick a college that's right for me? I had worked at admissions when I was in undergraduate and I was in business school. And then I went away. I had kids. I had, started my career, chose not to work in admissions, but I spent several decades, I won't specify exactly how many, but spent my career developing a suite of new products and services for a range of different industries. I mean, everything from washing machines to wind turbines. And so lots of different skill sets, but everything really focused around looking at how are things done in this market and is there a better way? Are the things that we do, the products that we offer, the services that we offer, really working for the people that they're intended to serve? And if not, why not? And are there some things that we might be able to potentially borrow from other industries and bring into this space to the benefit of the people in that space? I'm not a coder. I'm not a scientist. I typically don't invent a ton of new stuff myself. What I try to do is say, there's a way that people over here are doing this that actually might be really helpful to you. And it could involve the advent of a new technology that just hasn't arrived yet, or just some type of change that's like, wow, I wish I had thought of that. Or that's so much better. I mean, I'll give you one example from my past. I worked for Whirlpool starting in 2000, and I ran the washer dryer business. And that was predominantly then a top-loading washing machine business. And I don't know the statistics anymore, but I would say at least a third of washing machines these days are actually the big front-loading washing machines. And that product is something that my team and I developed while we were at Whirlpool. And we sort of solve for why the rest of the world is using front-loading washing machines, but the US uses top loaders. And front loaders are more energy efficient, they're more water efficient, they do a better job of cleaning with less damage to the clothes. And so we looked at that as a team and said, there's got to be some reason why Americans, which is the largest washing machine market in the world, are using a different technology. And so we figured out, what the problem was. We solved the problem. We made it bigger. We made it more Americanized. We launched that product, and they've sold over $1 billion worth of that so far. And it's just a really good example, I think, of listening to the consumer in the market and meeting their needs with something that we didn't have to invent. We just had to tailor to that usage, and good things happened. And so it was good listening skills, good observation skills, but no particular invention needed.
Okay, that's really interesting. This is not what we had talked about wanting to talk about, but this is why I love these conversations, because I've been thinking a lot recently about how one of the biggest challenges that I think nonprofits face, particularly smaller nonprofits who are both running their programs and then also trying to fundraise for their cause, is they have a lot of challenges switching the language that they're using, perhaps the way they're listening, the questions that they're asking from the constituents that they're serving to their donors, right? So they end up talking to their donors maybe the same way they're talking to other groups of community members or constituents, but they have different interests and different reasons for being involved in the organization. And so talking about the logistics of the services that the nonprofit provides to the donor is not that interesting. They're not giving because your program runs between Monday and Friday from 9 to 5. So how do you, I just hearing that story about how you really listened to the customer database. Nonprofits are holding multiple sort of quote unquote customers in a number of different ways where they need to really be tailoring their questions and they're listening. What suggestions might you have to help them be able to do that?
The best place to start is to spend time with those people. One of the things that we did, I'll just go back to my washing machine example, is we did what was called ethnographic research, which is a fancy way of saying we spent time in the wild with people using the product. And so for us, that meant we found 8 or 9 different houses in the US, across the US, of people that had small European front-loading washing machines. So they were using this technology that we thought would be applicable. And then we literally went and spent 4 or 5 hours in their home with them and watched them do laundry. And so we talked to them about, hey, what are you, why are you doing this? And just from gathering the clothes, sorting the clothes, loading the machine, all that stuff. And you're just taking a bunch of notes. And so you're really trying to get yourself immersed in their world, because the easiest thing in the world, or the most natural thing, is for us all to bring our own lens, our own presumption about what that person may need or is going through. And I'm bad at that. I'm very good at doing that, I should say, which is not a good thing, right? Because I think I've got a solution, and I want to stick that square peg in that round hole out of much care, right? And you have to pull back and say, wait a minute, let's figure out what the hole is first, and then find the solution that fits that need. And in education, it's, I think, fairly similar to what you described in the nonprofit world, in the sense that I'm a for-profit business trying to work with mostly nonprofit educators. I tend to work at a pretty quick kind of tech startup pace, and I'm working in higher education administrator kind of space where they have a different cycle. And so I need to slow down and listen and not presume. And so in that sense, for me, I benefit from not coming from a background of admissions, because I don't know what I'm talking about, or at least I didn't when I started. And so it forced me to take that time, immerse myself in their world, ask a lot of questions. As my dad would say, remember that you have 2 ears and 1 mouth. And so, proportionally, you should listen a lot more. And so I think that is probably the most important piece, is know that you are a visitor in their space, and respect and appreciate and want to genuinely learn from them. Immerse yourself in their environment, ask a lot of questions, listen attentively, and ask them and repeat back. Am I seeing this right? Am I seeing that right? And then go away and try to put together the pieces, and then come back to them and say, look, this is what I think I heard. Here's a solution. How would that work for you?
So I love that advice. And I'm curious, I'm assuming when you've done this, you've uncovered a lot of surprises, or things that maybe have challenged the way that you thought about things in the past, or even presented things in the past internally to your company about what mattered. And then you did this new research, and all of a sudden you realize these other things mattered that you hadn't thought about before. In the nonprofit sector, I think sometimes we can get very trapped in some perfectionist tendencies around always getting it right, and a lot of resistance to ever getting it wrong, even though the reality is we're out here in uncharted territory, in spaces where we really need to do the best we can with the information we have. And then once we know better, do better and make shifts. How have you managed that for yourself or for your teams when you've either needed to change a direction and sort of get people to adopt a new way of seeing something or thinking about something, and then even for yourself, sort of overcoming some of that?
Yeah. When I first started to pay attention to this opportunity, and I just to step back, this opportunity being Troove, I came at this as a parent. So I think I have a skill set in developing new products and services, and I certainly have a lens through which I see the world, which is always asking that question, I wonder why it's done that way, and is there a better way? And it can be annoying, right? I mean, I can be going to a restaurant and saying, well, why is the kitchen over there and not over there? And why do we do it? So it can be a problem for my family. But in this instance, I have 3 children who are now all grown. They're no longer children. But when I took my oldest on her first college visit, and through this process, I thought, my goodness, this is terrible. This is exactly what I left 20 years ago when I graduated, and the internet has happened in those intervening 20 years. So I was expecting this very different, modern, technical process that had been significantly altered by all the technical changes that have happened in the world from, I graduated from business school in 1996. So literally sort of the beginning of the internet. And what I found was so different. And what I thought the problem was going into this was helping kids get into college, because that was my lens, right? That's the problem we're going to solve. We're going to help kids get into college. And when you start to actually dig into that, you recognize that only about 3 to 4% of all of the 4,000 colleges and universities in the United States are what's called highly selective, which means that they accept roughly 5% or fewer, it should be 25% or fewer of their applications. And so for most schools, for 96% of all the schools out there, getting in is not the problem. The average acceptance rate, if you look at just finished applications, is about 75%. So the problem that Americans have is not getting into college. The problem is actually getting out, right? It's a very different issue. And so when you start to, again, follow that thread of, okay, so most kids are applying and they're getting in, but then they're about 50%. In fact, the average is actually 51% of us actually stay and graduate within 6 years from the first school in which we enrolled. So it's a flip of the coin. Half the students actually leave, drop out, and there are 45 million Americans who have what's called stopped out of college. So they went, they spent some money, they probably have some debt, and they dropped out. So 45 million people have that problem. And there are so many other students that then transfer. And I think you transferred, right?
I did. Yep. Yeah. So I was one of those people.
And that's not an indication of failure. I mean, you ended up graduating, you've got advanced degrees, you're doing great, right? I transferred as well in 4 years. And so it's not necessarily a failure, other than it would have been so much nicer to have found my place to begin with. So anyway, to answer your question, I started this thinking the problem was one thing, which is how do I help people get into college and use technology to do it? And what I realized is the problem isn't getting in, it's getting out. And that we can really profoundly help students to find right out of the gate, we can help you find your passion and your people, which helps you find your place in a much more meaningful and substantial way that lasts. And that if we can do that, then we are going to significantly improve graduation rates. And again, if you just keep following those threads, if you compare the average life expectancy of someone who doesn't graduate from high school to someone who has a bachelor's degree, the person with a bachelor's degree on average lives about 15 years longer. So by simply helping people to not just get into college, but get out, we are literally helping extend people's lives. And when you look at the quality of those lives, forget about the earnings, which are substantially better, but it's every incidence of disease and kind of this upward mobility that we all aspire to in our society. All these things become available when you can actually achieve the education and the diploma. And so the obsession that America has with chasing acceptance letters as opposed to chasing diplomas makes no sense to me. So
Okay.
There's a lot there.
There's so much there. And this might not be where you think I'm going to go from there. But one of the things that I think is so fascinating about what you just explained is, in some ways, it sounds to me, and tell me if I'm wrong, that you picked a harder problem to tackle. Because then what you realized when you made this shift was like, we're focused on the wrong thing. And so eyes are on acceptance, but you're trying to educate people on the fact that our eyes should be on diplomas, and you're making that case for why this matters more, in addition to trying to sort of grow and scale and onboard people to your product. So tell me about that a little bit, because I think you're doing something that a lot of nonprofits need to do, and some do really well and some struggle with, which is helping their community become more problem aware around the real problem. There's all the kind of quick clickbaity ways we can talk about the work that we do, but to really take people on the journey about what really matters here is what it sounds like you're doing with this product. And I think there's something really interesting we can learn from that.
Yeah, for sure. And, the analogy I sometimes use with people is I say, we don't all walk around and say, I got a reservation at the most amazing restaurant the other day. Who cares if you got let in, right? I mean, you want to talk about the meal you had. Like, I had the most amazing dinner with my friends at this new restaurant and it was fantastic. And you don't care. Oh yeah, of course I got in. And I would also say that, when I started this, I started looking at it sort of objectively from the sidelines. And when I thought the problem was, how can I help improve the way that we all get into college? And I thought that was intellectually interesting. And it got me studying and learning and doing some of those kind of listening things that we talked about earlier. And as I learned more that the problem is getting out, not getting in, and that problem is disproportionately borne by the people in our society that have less. They have less education, they have less family money, they have less access to good advice, to SAT classes, all these things. They are directly related to academic success, to higher education success and admission. And so that took me from I'm interested in this to I'm going to invest myself in this. When I say invest myself, yes, money, but I'm talking about I'm going to spend my time. I'm going to change my career and go from I spent the 12 years prior to this last 3 years in higher education working in renewable energy. And I said, okay, I think I'm ready for a change. This is kind of interesting. And I was looking at a bunch of things. And when I finally realized that there was actually this inequity in this system, and it's really about outcomes and not inputs, and it's about helping people to live better, richer, fuller lives, now you got me, right? And so following that thread became much more rewarding to me individually and change my commitment level. And so I would encourage people to be open to the idea that your ideas can evolve, your understanding can evolve, and that may well help evolve either your interest or the interest in the constituencies you're trying to reach out to, donors, customers, constituents in any type, because you're getting closer to that root issue, which really reverberates, really resonates with people. And that's what you should be looking for.
Yeah. Okay. I love that. And I also think you really modeled for us one way to do this with donors, which is storytelling, bringing people on the story of when I started, this is what I thought too, maybe like you. And then as I started to dig into it, here's what I realized. And so I love that you sort of gave folks, real tangible example of how you do that. Something else that I think I have to sort of ask is I love the evolution of business to be solving social problems. I think in a way we were not seeing 20, 25 years ago when I was graduating from college. I really felt like it was like, if you want to make, do good in the world, you go, into these tracks. And if you want to make money, you go into these tracks. And there was this real split. And now we're seeing businesses like yours step up and solve social problems and being rooted in the social problem for why they're there, just like you talked about and how that. And so I'm just curious because I think there are a lot of folks who listen to this who are social entrepreneurs and are thinking about, if I'm not in the nonprofit sector together forever, what might be next for me? Can you just talk to us a little bit about the role you see business being able to play and why Troove is a business and not a nonprofit and how it's able to do that and still really focus on social impact?
Yeah. I'm a business person. I have an MBA. I believe that capitalism can be good, but it's horribly sort of misguided and broken at the moment. And without getting into too deep a debate on that, I just really feel like, as you said, there is a change that's happened in the last few decades where I, as an entrepreneur, say, look, I wouldn't consider myself an artist, but I'd say, my medium is business, right? I express myself through business, and I understand profit motivation, and I think about trying to align incentives for myself and for my customers, and to have equal value, and that's sort of how I've trained myself to think. It's how I instinctively think about these issues, and so I know objectively that there is profit opportunity in a marketplace that could be predominantly a nonprofit marketplace. It could be, like higher education is predominantly a nonprofit marketplace. But when I look at the enrollment business, and it's a business, colleges and universities in this country spend roughly $10 billion a year to find and enroll students. And the gross inefficiency of that system is astounding. And so to the extent that I can come along and say, look, I see a better way. And if I can actually deliver on that, and I can get enough people to buy into that and create some momentum and start to move that industry, the opportunity, I think if done right, involves my saying, this isn't about shifting some of those billions to me. This is about societal return back to the people that are benefiting from the education. And I'm going to do just fine. It has to be not about the money, but about the mission. And my customers who are who are higher education administrators, I believe that they would smell it coming a mile away if all I was trying to do was to grab some of their money. But this is genuinely, I have such deep respect for the role of admissions officers in this country, and that they are trying to do noble work, and they are trying to help young people to better their lives, to extend their lives, to enrich their lives. And if I can help them with that, then I need to bring that motivation in full disclosure. I got to bring that to them in what we do and how we think about this. And that pervades the culture of the company I'm trying to build, the way I want to incentivize people, the way I want to share in the good things that we hope to happen, here, not just for investors, but for our customers and for the students and who use our service. Everyone's got to benefit. We've got to kind of use the tide to raise all those ships, not disproportionately do it, which is where I go back to that sort of point about capitalism potentially being a little askew, where there are too few who are benefiting too much from what should be more of a societal benefit. And so rooting us in that, more of a nonprofit-y kind of, the mission is what actually moved me from I'm interested to I'm engaged. It's what made the difference for me. And so that the value I place on the mission orientation of this business has got to be central to everything that we do, from the service that we offer, the way we price it, the way we compensate our employees. Everything has got to be consistent with that worldview.
I really appreciate that. And I also think, you said at the beginning about how a lot of your work over the years has been about what can we learn from other industries and apply to the problem I'm solving right now. And I feel like that's something I'm consistently exploring, is like, where is there knowledge outside of the sector that we could be learning from and applying to our work? And I think something that you're modeling here as well that's really important that I just want to highlight for nonprofits is having a business background allows you to center mission, but not be afraid of money, And I think being able to have transparency around our work with different constituents involves aligning incentives with each of those constituents. And those incentives are going to look different for each of the populations. There's a different incentive for the students using your platform than there are for the universities bringing your platform in. And I think being able to, feel confident that you're offering something of value to all of those partners, not shying away from the financial components, but having the mission rooted into it. I really want nonprofits to take something away from that, because I think we, especially when we're tailoring our work to the incentives of our donors and different types of donors, individuals invest in organizations for different reasons than corporate partners and foundations. And with each type of funder, we need to be aligning incentives in ways that apply to that constituent base. And I think, and we can't be afraid of talking about the value that we're offering and the financial elements of that. So I really appreciate your lens on that, because I think it models it really well.
Yeah, thank you. And I think there is a commonality to the why of our business. I noticed on your website, you talk about your why. And I like that construct, because the why to me should be pretty similar, maybe articulated in a slightly different way, but essentially the same reasons why Troove is important in the marketplace should be a great answer and a good starting point for my investors as well as for my customers. But the how and the when and all those other things that follow, that should follow the why, they don't often follow the why. Too many of us get into the how too quickly. But if you stick to your why first and say, Troove wants to help people find their passion, people, and place in education. Okay, that's interesting. Now, from a funding standpoint, there are venture capitalists and business focused people who have a financial motivation, for whom I need to explain the specifics of how we're going to deliver on that and what's in it for them, right? And that's okay. But it also opens up the potential that there are an awful lot of family offices and foundations that are focused on that same mission that create new opportunity for me, who actually might be better aligned with us from an investment standpoint, because they're maybe a little more patient and a little bit more willing to invest some of that margin back into the mission, where a venture capitalist might want a faster financial return. But the same why applies to my customer base and my employee base, my prospective employee base, because I'm looking for people that are turned on by that passion as well. And they need a functional skill set. But that's the what or the how, right? But the why doesn't change. And so when I go to schools and we start talking about why this matters, and you say, why does it matter for people to find their passion first? Can we help you find prospects in the ocean of people out there looking for colleges? And there are roughly 2 million high school students, seniors in this year, who will enroll in college next fall. And like I said before, there are 45 million adults that have some amount of college credit who are no longer enrolled in college. So, and add international students to that, and you're looking at roughly 50 million people out there looking to enroll potentially in US colleges and universities every year. And so explaining what's in it for them to say, we can help you actually to find the things that you are passionate about, that people who have the same passions and interests, enthusiasms have found success, not just getting that acceptance letter, but getting their diploma and getting the education at these schools. And so these are the ones you should talk to. And so the why is the building block, and where you have to really start and be articulate and a little unforgiving with yourself to get there and really test it and share it with people and say, does that make sense to you? Does that sound silly? Does that sound right? Does that really resonate? And make sure that all your constituencies are sort of weighing in on that, and have no pride of authorship. Don't be ashamed of throwing it out there and having people say, that's actually kind of dumb. Like, I don't know what you're talking about. Right? It's you have to be willing to take that if you want to get to the other side of it, in fact, being dumb, because it probably will at some point start out not being perfect.
That is such good advice. All of that is really good advice. David, thank you so much for this conversation, for joining me today, for telling us about Troove. I'm so grateful for the work that you're doing, for how you're disrupting this space, and for sharing all of your wisdom with us.
Absolutely, Mallory. Thank you so much.